Energy changes everything. Energy literally changes your day, it changes the person you are, it changes your productivity, it changes your impact in this world. Energy changes your mood, it changes the way that you parent, it changes the way that you interact with people, it changes everything.
Welcome to the True Health Solutions podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Lonnie Bagwell, stress, inflammation, and functional health clinician.
And I'm your co-host, Brigitte Spurgeon, metabolism and nutrition expert.
This podcast is where we bring hope, truth, and inspiration for your holistic health journey.
Because the world needs the best version of you.
Hello, and welcome to True Health Solutions podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Lonnie Bagwell, with my co-host,
Brigitte Spurgeon.
And we are excited to talk to you today. We're shifting gears from last week's podcast. Today, we're going to be talking about metabolism and energy, something that everybody wants more of. And even if they don't fully understand metabolism, it's something that affects every aspect of their life and their body. So they want more of that too. But before we get started, as always, we start off the show with talking a little bit more about where we are with our health journey. What we're encountering. We just came out of a season of focusing on teaching workshops, webinars, and talking about detox on the podcast. So we have some updates on that, and then we'll shift into talking about metabolism and energy. So Brigitte, we were talking pre-show. Actually, we've talked all week long about something that you're encountering. Share with our listeners and viewers what it is that you've been dealing with, kind of a unique thing, but even maybe a dangerous thing when it comes to toxicity.
Sure. I shared on a previous episode that living here on the coast now, that I've been eating a lot of fresh seafood and salads, and that's been amazing. But last weekend, Sandy and I, we took a hike down to some beaches, and I started noticing all these dead fish in the ocean and on the beach. And so I went to do a little research and found out that there is, or was, red tide going on over here. And basically there's a neurotoxin that's produced, that's what's killing the fish. And I suddenly got nervous because obviously all the fish here, it's fresh caught fish locally. And so they're probably fine because they're probably caught deeper out in the ocean and they're probably not affected, but I couldn't get past like what I now knew. And so I've not been able to eat fish the whole week since I found this out, which now is...
This is just real talk right now. This is just real talk. Oh my gosh.
Yes, it's definitely disrupted my nutrition. So I've shifted. I did actually do a little bit of beef, but really I have shifted towards now like eating a little bit more vegetarian diet, still doing some eggs. But so I actually personally don't respond the best to a vegetarian diet, even though I love it. I grew up vegan and vegetarian. So I have to do some problem solving now, and I've got to figure it out on the side. But I just naturally just went into like, okay, I'm going to do lentils. And I actually even ate oatmeal the other day, which is something I never eat, but
this is what happens. This is the effect of stress and fear. We have to solve this problem so we can get you back.
Which we are going to be talking about today.
Exactly. You got it. That sets us up nicely. And then just real quick, well, two things. I guess I'll share. One thing is I'm actually really familiar with red tide because with my in-laws vacationing in Florida, that's always a concern coming in there on the Gulf Coast. And we spent a lot of time down there. And then actually my boys actually had to be detoxed from red tide exposure. That was one of the things that was found with a natural health clinician down in Florida. And my family had to make special trips down there to be able to do that. So it's a serious thing, and more serious than probably a lot of people take it to be. And maybe if they understood it, it would be they would have to limit their exposure to it. And of course, we don't want to think about that, especially vacation spots and things, that nature. But and then a quick update for me. Everybody knows from the show that I've been doing modified carnivore and parasite cleanse. We're on day 28 as of right now on that, and feeling good, except I'm really looking forward to my skin clearing up. I know that's been a thing. I've been really pushing my body hard. Most people don't realize that, these parasite cleanses, they're not super nice to the body. So then we always follow up parasite cleanse with 30 days of detox to just help clean up those cells and just kind of clean everything out. And I look forward to that. I really look forward to my skin clearing up and not having these weird oddball aches and pains in my abdomen throughout the week. And side note, if you're going to do carnivore, I'm testing both of these things actually for protocols for our patients, right? So I'm always doing the things that we recommend to people. And one thing that I learned is if you're going to eat carnivore or modified carnivore, don't put a whole entire big bowl of raw vegetables into your stomach in the middle of that, because that did not turn out well. That had me in my infrared sauna at midnight, praying that it would just get out of my body. So lots of distension, lots of discomfort, and we made it through it. But lesson learned, and now I'm a better coach for that. So just a bunch of real talk this morning.
Why is that, Dr. Bagwell? Is it because of the enzyme shift, or?
I would say definitely there's an enzyme component, but really just the roughage and the fiber that my body, this would be great for future episodes, and maybe we need to dive into stuff like this in the future. But fiber, not as important as it's been taught to us that it is. That's what's being revealed more with people who are doing more extreme dieting like carnivore. So it's really questionable the importance of fiber, or how important it really is. And so my body's been doing absolutely fantastic with absolutely zero fiber of any kind, minor fiber with some high antioxidant berries maybe, but so some fiber, but mostly it's been fantastic. And then just dropping that bomb in there really threw everything for a loop. I mean, it just kind of came out of left field, and I think my gut bacteria were unhappy with me. So that's the update on where we're at with our health journey. We'll keep sharing about our health journey and the solutions that we're finding along our way as we're continuing to teach about the hottest topics in natural health care. And so today we're talking about metabolism and energy. And we were talking beforehand, and we of course start going down different rabbit holes. But really for this episode, and there will be more episodes, of course, we're talking about this. But for this episode, we need to tell people, what is metabolism? Because what do people think of when they hear the word metabolism right away? And they kind of summarize it just in a half of a sentence, I feel like. What do people usually think?
Weight loss or burning calories.
That's it, right? I mean, that's what's been marketed. I mean, it's not their fault. That's what they've been told it is, through the last 30 or 40 years, right? And contrast to that simplified explanation, what would be your definition, Brigitte, of metabolism, more holistically speaking?
The process by which your body makes energy.
There you go. And that's what ties together the energy conversation. And, you're in agreement with this. Obviously, you're the weight loss guru. Both have backgrounds in biochemistry. But I've asked thousands and thousands of people, not exaggerating, in workshops, and just say, how many of you would like to have more energy tomorrow than you had today? Right? One of those simple questions just to get people's mindset framed around the talk. And it's actually people, if you said, I can take 30 pounds off, or I can give you amazing energy tomorrow to get through your day, like they immediately want the energy. But it's a natural tendency for that, because we call it the currency of life, right? So this is the fuel in your car, right? That even gives you a chance to go. Then we can worry about how we're going and where we're going. And so I just love the fact that we can apply a holistic principle to this idea of metabolism, understand how it's energy that affects cellular function. Like if you want to fight viruses well, you need energy. If you want to digest food well, you need energy, right? This is just as truly, we're talking about this engine, this Ferrari that you've been given, and we need to quit treating it like a Yugo. That's how I like to talk about it anyway. But
energy changes everything. Energy literally changes your day. It changes the person you are. It changes your productivity. It changes your impact in this world. Energy changes your mood. It changes the way that you parent. It changes the way that you interact with people. It changes everything.
Absolutely. I've experienced that more as I've gotten older, and I've been able to be more productive in my days and weeks. And I guess I just have valued energy more, and I've paid more attention to it and seen it go up and down. And I can really, like you say about the relationship stuff, I mean, it's energy management has actually become my primary focus for my health. So that's been my most foundational principle, energy management. And so I'm excited to talk about this and share all of our kind of tips, tricks, strategies, and secrets, that we've been working through over the last several years, both developing the weight loss and metabolic programs, but then also just living it out. So if we're foundationally speaking, if there was one thing that you felt like interfered with, the greatest saboteur of having optimal metabolism, what would that one thing be for our listeners? Just right away, let's go ahead and drop that out there, and then we'll start talking about some solutions over this and following podcast.
I'm going to answer that based on looking at trend lines with our patient intake. So looking at this clinically and from a numbers standpoint, I would say over the last 2 years, I have noticed stress being a huge impactor, and therefore I'm going to say interfering with energy production or interfering with metabolism, which then is affecting ability or inability to lose weight.
Yeah, right on, right. I mean, stress, the underlying cause of 21st century disease. You can listen to us. You can read the cover of Time magazine. I think it's become pretty widespread in its acceptance of causing these problems. And of course, metabolic diseases are rampant, right? They're at higher rates than they've ever been in the history of the world. We've created, in the last single lifetime, we've created new diseases that didn't even exist, metabolic diseases, that didn't exist 50 or 100 years ago. So, and from my perspective, I know there's so many different ways that stress impacts metabolism and weight loss. I guess share with our listeners, and let's just talk for a minute about how you've actually seen that play itself out.
Let me give you just a current example. I literally just had LaDonna share this with me this morning. So a patient came in this week. Her name is Barbara. She wouldn't mind me sharing. And she initially actually had great results on our program, like decreasing inflammation in her body. She is, I believe she's in her 70s, and she comes to us with just a history of heart disease, inflammatory diseases, lists of medications and so forth. And so off the bat, feeling amazing. But she hit a period in her program where she was getting discouraged and frustrated, and probably because of not realizing her access to certain tools and just not having all the information, was just getting really frustrated, which I imagine causes stress and anxiety. And so she was meeting with her coach this week, and LaDonna had the opportunity to answer questions, to give her the resources that she needed, and also to pray with her. And, certainly the fruit of that is stress levels go down, the anxiety is eliminated, and you're able then to come out of that with peace. And literally the next day, she lost 5 pounds. Amazing. Now, that is a significant shift when you're going a few days, probably without losing weight, frustrated, which then is just fueling the frustration. But then a coach is able to come in, remove that interference, so to speak, and then her body is released to do what it should be doing. And that was just a powerful picture. And we actually see that a lot with our patients. I've seen that coaching patients where they're just getting their heads a little bit or something, or sometimes it's an external thing, maybe it's work or family stressor or some kind of stressor in their life, and it almost just can shut their body down. And then as soon as that stress is removed, like you will see 2 to 4 pounds lost in a day. So Dr. Bagwell, do you mind sharing with us why that would happen to a patient? Like, what is going on in their body at a physiological level?
Yeah, I think a couple of things I'm thinking right now is just that I think people weren't expecting to hear that today on a Metabolism and Energy show, and yet as you're saying it, I can roll through that physiological response in my head and give you 15 different explanations for how that's even possible. Whereas people would say, "Oh my gosh, that's a miracle!" Like, your body's already a miracle. It already is this incredible Ferrari, right? Like we just need to treat it as such and stop putting bad gas in it and take good care of it, and it'll do crazy things like that. And but the clinical side of that is that stress just impacts absolutely every cell, tissue, organ, and gland in the body, right? So if you're when you go into a stress state, your body is not focused on certain things and it shifts heavily to focus on other things. So for example, you're going to mobilize sugar, when you're living in a stress response. And in an acute situation, that's great because you're going to dump some sugar into the bloodstream and you need that quick energy. And then right behind that, your body's going to drop some fat into the bloodstream so you have more sustained energy. And at first, people listen to this are going to say, wait a minute, that's a good thing, right? So I want to be more stressed so that I'm burning all this stuff up, right? But what unfortunately happens in a chronic state is the body maladapts. Now we're increasing inflammation. Now we're damaging gut health because our body also quit digesting food properly. Now we're affecting hormones. And that's really at the crux of, I think, how this patient responded physiologically, is that when you're in that chronic stress state, and you are constantly you're using up all of your resources to produce cortisol and cortisone over and over and over again, which most people listening would know that's the stress hormone and its counterpart. So the cortisol is the gas and the cortisone's the brake. And when you're stuck in that cycle of just burning all that up, now we see these women especially, but men also, this is where we see testosterone drop. This is going to be future conversations that we're going to have on hormones. But, now we see women that actually, will start to become estrogen dominant, or maybe both estrogen and progesterone are shutting down, DHEA is shutting down. And so their body is in this stress state. It's not even, it doesn't have the correct mechanisms in place to be able to properly burn fat, but also at the same time, they start to retain water. Right, they're not releasing the water. Their body's becoming more toxic, so now it's holding on to more water. They're pushing stuff into fat cells. This is going back into the detox discussion, right? So there's this, again, you can talk about 15 different ways that stress makes you not lose weight. At the end of the day, those people that are stressed will lose on average 15 to 20% less than someone in the same time period, according to some of the stats that we were just looking up. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I think about her body. So it's like removing the interference. And then, because the thing is, in this case, she is already eating reasonably low carbohydrate. So she's eating nutritionally the way that I would recommend someone eat to burn fat. Right. So she's doing the right things, but what happens is the stress is causing her to dump those glycogen stores in her bloodstream. So it's not allowing her body to go into fat metabolism. So she's not having that shift. But now you remove the stress. So now cortisol lowers. So now she's no longer dumping those glycogen stores into the bloodstream. So now her insulin lowers, and now she can go into fat burning. So she now goes to sleep at night without all this physiologically going on. And now overnight, her body can burn stress. So her body, in essence, switches from a sugar burning pathway into a ketogenic pathway, which is in ketosis. Now we know when you go into ketosis, your kidneys actually, they will start to release sodium with that flushes the water. So when you talk about like water retention, then flushing the water out, so she shifts into ketosis and probably wakes up in the morning, like urinates a bunch, or maybe even had some urination overnight, just urinating it out. So she is partially losing some water weight, but it's just because her body's switching into the appropriate pathway to burn fat, which she needs. And then, so let's say 2 pounds of that 5 pounds is water weight, or even 2.5 pounds. And then the rest of that is literally fat that she's losing the next day.
And now she's primed for ongoing fat loss, right? She's adapted back into the proper state. And I was just thinking, as you were talking, I'm like, really 2 main things are happening there. Like one is your body literally will stop digesting food when you're in a stress state. It literally, you can cut cut the stomach open of someone who's and that they'll just be partially digested food just sitting there. And so you can literally eat 3,000 in that stress state. You can eat 3,000 calories and be completely malnourished, because your body's not breaking it down and absorbing all those nutrients. So you can actually be eating, like you had said, she was eating a diet that's usually congruent with it. She might have been eating perfectly, but the stress will not allow for her to get the benefits of that eating perfectly, right? And then the other side of it is that because in a temporary situation, this can be good for energy and getting away from the bear in the woods, but your body will literally induce a diabetic state. Like it'll drive you into what would be classified as a diabetic state, because it's supposed to only be temporary. But then we wonder why diabetes is so rampant, in the United States. Well, we've been stressed out of control, 7 out of 10 or higher stress for the last 40 or 50 years. And we're literally just cultivating diabetes, right, over and over again, which then feeds the other diseases. But all of that being metabolic disorders, which is what we're talking about today, is metabolism. Yep. And at the end of the day, even if someone doesn't even have weight to lose, but they're stressed, they're not producing energy properly to be able to run their body, to be able to digest food, to be able to have clear thoughts, right?
Yep. And I have to mention, as you're talking about this, have to mention the state that your body gets into physiologically with grief. So you and I went through grief last year. You lost a parent. I lost 2 parents last year. And so going through that personally, it just really highlights what happens in the body. And so that's one of exactly what we're talking about. Your body is in a stress state, whether you feel it or not, because I was, when you saw me going through that, I was like, I'm fine. I was productive. I was functional, but literally cortisol was coursing through my bodies. And I actually had lab testing done, which showed what an elevated stress state my body was in. My LDL went up, my estrogen went, or my estradiol went up, and my reverse T3 went up, or stress markers. And I just think about so many of our patients that we see, they've lost someone in their lives, they've had had a divorce, or like some major stressful event. And what do they see post? They see weight gain, or they would see a diagnosis with an inflammatory disease, or
Right.
heart disease,
Absolutely.
or diabetes, or autoimmune disease, or or cancer,
You
right?
got it.
So
Yeah.
so
Common.
within 5 years, there's a high incidence of cancer after a woman loses a loved one.
Right. No, absolutely. Yeah, that is like an amplification of that stress response, and it hits hard and fast. And I think that you're just highlighting another thing that I think is really important is like we aren't just clinicians, but we're helping hold people accountable. We're a community is the word I'm looking for, and it's so important to be a clinician, to actually care about and love the people, not treat the condition, but treat the patient. Helps, and maybe not even treat, but just support and facilitate the healing of that patient, might be a better way to put it. And that has to do with understanding their current state. And sometimes we need to be able to look at someone, give them a hug, and say, let's take a few days off. You know what I mean? And that's what I know I had to do. I had to double down on lifestyle habits, healthy lifestyle habits during that time. Right? I had to focus on sleep, things that are foundational: sleep, and energy management, like we talk about, breathing. Right? We talk about that a lot. And so we had to focus on those things so that I don't end up on the other side of the grief, wrecked physiologically. But I also wasn't expecting to drop 5 pounds in 3 days, when I'm dealing with the loss of a loved one, right? So we have to, have that proper perspective, and that decreases stress in and of itself, because we're not totally freaking out and stressing out that we're not getting results that we thought we should be while we're wrestling a bear over here, right? The body's not worried about dropping 2 pounds around the waistline when you're fighting for your life, or it perceives that you're fighting for your life. This is so good. This is literally, we're solving 21st century disease on today's podcast. I hope people are hearing that. And we probably could talk about this stuff for the next 30 episodes, because it really does impact literally everything: stress and energy, right? Positive and negative effects, everything. But let's just go ahead and wrap up today's podcast by talking about what are our top solutions. So just kind of simply go through your very first thing, most important thing that people should do if they want to improve their metabolic function and increase their energy. What would be their top focus?
Yeah, most people need a metabolic priming or a metabolic reset. And so you have to train your body how to use different metabolic pathways. Our bodies are conditioned to use carbohydrates as fuel, but alternatively, our body can also use nutritional fat or body stored fat as fuel. And so it's teaching your body how to use those. We will link a 15-minute training on metabolic pathways in the show notes. So you can go into the show notes, click on that, and that actually walks through the 90-day strategy that I use with my patients. It is our signature fat loss program, metabolic program in the clinic. We have other versions of it as well, but you can just go and review that for more information on how to do that.
Yeah, so we'll put that link in the show notes. And then my first thing that I wrote down is, we've already been talking about it, but address the stress was my number one thing. Obviously, you have to address the stress. And I think the first thing is to understand what stress really is, because in the world, it's that mindset first thing, right? We've got to get the mindset first. And if you're going to tackle the cause of 21st century disease and maybe the number one underlying cause of metabolic disruption, then you better understand what it is. You can't just show up to the football field with a tennis racket and think that you're going to accomplish anything good there. And so know what stress is, which we talk about all the time. It's this amazing, incredible, and perfect response of the body. But if left to be day in and day out in that same stress state, it starts to cause the maximum destruction that you can cause to your body. And so understanding what stress is, and I don't like to, you know this, you were even being careful with your words before the show. It's like, I don't like to just tell everybody take one thing, right? Because we're all about customizing recommendations, running labs, testing, don't guess, all that stuff. But there are classes of supplements that really do work across the board. Not the total topic for today, but adaptogens generally can be used by everybody. And our favorite adaptogen for the purpose of just helping neutralize that stress response so the body can stay fluid in its metabolic function. My favorite would be ashwagandha. So if you're going to take one supplement to help reduce the effects of stress, then I would just take ashwagandha as a baseline. And then, of course, we're always available to talk. You know, we can ask questions, within the podcast here or wherever it's posted. And we're happy to talk with you more about other recommendations depending on types of stress and emotional stuff that you're going through or whatever. So number one, address the stress. For me, what's your number two, Brigitte?
Always have a coach or a mentor in your life, and that could be a business, a spiritual, a health coach. You know, certainly within our programs, our patients get a weight loss coach. And I just think in Barbara's example, if she didn't have LaDonna in her corner, you know, that weekly appointment with LaDonna, she may not have got past that point, and she may have given up and then never had victory in her life when it comes to her metabolism and her weight and her inflammation. And so having a coach, I know even for me, like I literally used to be a marathon coach, but if I train for an endurance event, I hire a coach because it helps me focus on it better. But then in those times when I'm inside my own head, you need someone who has the bigger picture, who's looking from the outside in to actually give you true perspective, to speak truth and life into you.
That's awesome. I love that. Do the reset, address the stress, get a coach, and broadly just be part of a community that cares about you and has the tools and ability to support you and get you to where you want to be. And then my second thing, the last thing for how we would help improve metabolism, like just for everybody listening to this, is I want to say focus on your sleep. And so just a foundational principle, I mentioned it, that it's one of the things that I've got really hyper focused on in the last year or two, and especially through times of grief. But equal to or less than 6 hours a night of sleep is correlated directly, statistically significant increase in the likelihood of obesity. We're not talking about gaining 5 pounds or just being overweight. We're talking about full-blown obesity at six hours or less, that your body's fighting to push obesity, right? If you're not getting enough sleep. I don't know if I can say that strong enough for people that are listening to this. Like, well, I want to lose weight, but I only get 6 hours of sleep a night. There may not be a stronger force next to stress itself that can stop you from being able to lose that weight. You know, so definitely address the stress. And then when we start, and again, we're going to talk about hormones in future episodes, but with men, you brought this up because this is a big statistic for men that are in the weight loss program. If you're not sleeping 5 hours or less per night, right? So if you're getting 5 or less, then you have a 25% less testosterone. And so not only is that a major problem for men in general, but now you're literally dropping lean mass, which is part of your basal metabolic rate, right? And part of your fat burning organ of the body, and it impacts that deeply and directly. Now you have 25%, now your lean mass is dropping because the testosterone drops. So you're not only are you trying to fight an uphill battle, but you're literally just basically, made it a slippery slope for yourself, to try to get that weight off. So for me, it's address the stress, address the sleep.
Absolutely.
So that's it for today's show. Thank you so much for listening. Remember, like the episode, make sure that you subscribe so you can get updates to future shows. Also, feel free to reach out to us and let us know what you want to hear about. What are the top things in your health adventure, in your health journey that you need more solutions for? But as for today, I'm your host, Dr. Lonnie Bagwell. Thanks again for joining us. Brigitte, you got anything to say to everybody before we check out?
When you have efficient metabolic pathways and are optimally producing energy, you become the true greatest version of you.
I love it. All right. We'll tune in next time. We can't wait to see you again. Thanks for joining us today on True Health Solutions Podcast. Make sure that you click to subscribe. Also, go to our website, www.truehealthcharlotte.com, where you can download any resources related to today's show or any future shows. And lastly, if you search for True Health Center Group on Facebook, you'll be able to join our free health community. We look forward to seeing you there.